Mr. Smigel, you're still here. So in the year 2000, a significant year for anyone who's a fan of the Conan O'Brien show, you took what you were doing in spirit in the cartoons on SNL, and you created a whole series called TV Funhouse.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that?
I just wanted to, after a couple of years doing the cartoons at SNL, I thought, well, this is a rich field of, rich playground within to work. And I thought, why not get other writers involved and just make a show that was all about cartoons and, where I developed recurring characters as well as just doing topical stuff. And
now, before it wound up on Comedy Central...
Yes, I did a pilot for Fox with the clowns.
Talk about that, because it's one of my favorite things you've done ever.
Well, it was called Saturday TV Funhouse, but it was meant to be shown Friday night at like 11 o'clock or 11:30. And the joke was it was the last cartoon show of the day, or maybe it was Saturday night at 11. And it was meant to be the last Saturday cartoon show of the day.
Okay.
And so that was the theme as a children's show. And it was starring Prozo, which was basically the Chicago version of Bozo, who was played by this legend, Bob Bell. It was the most popular thing among children who grew up within a certain era in Chicago. And Bob Bell played Bozo, kind of very jovial, but kind of half speed. Like, hey kids, okie dokie. And he, by the time I saw Bob Bell, when I was in Chicago, he was like 60. So that's how he did it.
Mm-hmm.
And he did a lot of like veering off the script just to screw with, the guy who played Cookie the Clown, that kind of thing. So I thought that would be a really funny thing to recreate and make it inappropriate. And so he came out and he sang a song like, if you're Jewish and you know it, clap your hands. And then he went through different other religions.
And you did this in front of real parents and children in a studio audience.
Yeah, that was the verisimilitude that the project demanded. That was the big choice. Yeah, to do a parody of a children's show with some inappropriate material in front of an audience that looked like the same show. So basically, yes, it was mostly children and their parents. There were a few stragglers, funny, in there too, but that's really what it was. And then, most of the material was just okay for them to see. If there was an inappropriate cartoon, we wouldn't show it. In fact, we would say, we had the ringmaster sing a song, time for the little ones to go. This is the inappropriate part of the show. It's a dirty cartoon, but you'll be back soon, 'cause there's ice cream in the next room. And there was like a march. It was like the big grand march out of the room. Come on, kids 12 and under, join me in the other room. And he would march out of the room with these kids.
Oh, how was that not actually in the show?
It was in the show.
It was?
In the clown show.
Oh, I don't remember that.
It's there, yeah. A couple of my nephews are in there marching.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
and they go into a room where there's like a billy goat and a petting zoo set up and ice
I
cream.
vaguely remember.
Yeah. And then we play like Ambiguously Gay Duo or some kind of similarly wrong piece. And that show did not get on Fox. It was supposed to be like in the Mad TV slot. I don't know what they ended up doing, but not that. Mm-hmm. Then I pitched that to Comedy Central, and they, about a year later, and by now Triumph was even bigger. This is like now we're into 1999, and he's gone to Westminster, and so Triumph's blown up, and now they just want animals, like do puppets and animals. And so that's what TV Funhouse, the show, was on Comedy Central.
With your pal?
With my pal Doug Dale, who was my friend from the comedy group in Chicago that, I got hired for SNL, and he just missed being a cast member. And he's still one of the funniest people I've ever met. And yes, Doug Dale was the host of TV Funhouse. Your pal Doug.
So how was that experience?
It was a little harder than the clown show. Clown show was really fun. The animal show was hard. We did a lot of sketches where basically the premise was Doug is like a friendly kind of children's host who interacts with a bunch of puppets known as the Anipals.
Right.
And the Anipals are, very human and regular people but they're puppets. There's a turtle and a dog and a chicken and a lobster, I don't remember. And then every show they just get bored and they walk off the show to go on an adventure. And Doug is left hanging, presenting things and introducing cartoons, but we also follow the Anipals to wherever their adventure takes them. So there was a narrative story going on at the same time as the cartoons, and that was the show. But it was a lot of puppets interacting with animals, and now there were these elaborate puppet stages that were 3 feet high, and the actors would have to crouch under these puppet stages with holes in them, and we'd stick our hands up, and we would manipulate these animal puppets, and there'd also be live animals on top of this puppet stage, in a church or wherever the hell.
Yeah, the mix of the puppet animals and the live. I remember the cat giving birth to kittens.
Yeah, that's the most famous bit.
Why don't you tell what that was?
That was Dino Stamatopoulos' idea, bless his heart, and it was I don't remember how we set it up, but it was a delivery room, and it was a cat couple. The cat mom is giving birth, and she's on a bed, and there's a dog. There's a Boston Terrier, obstetrician who's delivering the babies for her, and the husband dog is right over her shoulder, and the cat husband, and the cat is screaming wildly. It's Jackie Hoffman.
I forgot.
Yeah, and so she's screaming and cursing and giving birth to kittens, but the kittens are live animals. So basically we just had a giant passageway between the cat's legs, the cat puppet's legs, where live kittens would just, emerge out of it, the whole like a clown car kind of thing, one after another. And it's just one of those things that I could never stop laughing at, because these animals have no idea how funny this bit is. And that just makes it so much funnier. They're just walking through some passage, and then finally one kitten who probably not alive anymore, but God rest its soul, a comic genius, made the choice to try to crawl back into the hole. And thankfully, wasn't one of the first two, or that would have blown the whole bit. This cat waited like the rule of 5 or so. The little kitten is thinking, okay, this is funny, but it needs an out. So the kitten tries to walk back into the hole, and I'm playing the dog puppet. No, don't go back in there. It's okay. It's okay. You're free to move around.
By the way, consistent with the Russian accent for the dog.
Oh, yeah, of course. The dog was an obstetrician. All the dogs in TV Funhouse had Russian accents. And then there was a punchline where a little puppy comes out. And now the husband's really mad, like somehow 1/8 of the semen that got into this cat was the doctor's. Yeah.
And there was another dog with a Russian accent that was always trying to catch its own tail.
Oh, that's my favorite character.
It's great.
Zabu. It was named after my wife's dog in the 80s. Had this gigantic dog that was part husky. They thought maybe part wolf. dumbest animal I've ever encountered in my life, an obedience school reject. But when he chased his tail, a dog's chasing their tail is always funny. But this dog just so stupid looking when he chased his tail because he was so big. And so we made a dog look exactly like this dog, Zabu, named it Zabu. And the joke was that basically in the logic of a talking animal, the tail was like the Roadrunner and the dog was Wile E. Coyote. So he would have all these elaborate plans. The tail thinks he's getting away this time, but no, I'm setting a trap. Hey, tail, take a look over there. You see that big sign? It says free. I don't even remember what he did to attract the tail, but it's one of my favorite bits ever.
So good. For anybody who loves funny animal videos, it's it's a notch above.
Yeah, no, he was my favorite character.
So now, why do you think the show didn't last on Comedy Central?
Oh, I know. No thinking and required.
Okay.
The show went way over budget because even though it was always about like not getting the animals to have to do any trained animal stuff, it still took forever to shoot these things. Just to get the animals in the right camera frame would take forever. If it's like animals in church or animals, at a Christmas party, it still just took forever. Or a cow just drinking a milkshake at the Sames restaurant where you eat what you are was the slogan. And we just couldn't, the budget just went out of control. And the ratings were okay, not great. It followed South Park, so there's a certain expectation. And the thing that came next was That's My Bush, which was Trey and Matt. Mm-hmm. And their show was also super expensive, and their ratings also didn't justify the cost.
As I recall, That's My Bush was doing fine until 9/11. And then
I don't think that's really what happened.
Really?
I don't think it's that.
I guess that's maybe I'm revising history, but I thought, we can't make fun of George W. Bush.
I feel like they were, you might be right, but I thought they were canceled before then.
Maybe. Because that was also a super funny show to me.
Yeah. But I think it's funny because I wanted to do a George Bush variety show because Dana Carvey was so popular in 1992 or 1. I was like, Lauren, what if we did a George Bush half hour every week where he does sketches with guests?
George Bush Sr., not
George Bush Sr., yeah.
Okay.
And Lauren's first thing was, what if something awful happens?
Wow.
In a week? Yeah, he like knows all, sees all. Anyway, yeah, so we tried to like do it for less money in Toronto. We set up we talked to animation studios there, like we're going to do the puppets in Toronto. It's going to cut the cost down, and we're going to do this, this, and this to make it more efficient. And then it just never happened.
So all this time, or did you take a break from doing the cartoons for SNL?
No, I was doing the cartoons simultaneously.
Oh my God.
Well, because I was already had the whole production team going. All I needed to do was like 2 or 3 cartoons more and just give those to SNL. So
shortly thereafter, you stopped doing the cartoons for SNL?
No, not shortly.
Couple of years?
I did them till 2008. I did them for like 11 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
they got rid of me. I was never going to leave. The writer's strike happened, and they...
in 2008.
Yeah, and they used it as an opportunity to slash budget. And one of the things I was grateful, like, because I got to do it for so long. And the year before, they had like dropped like 4 excellent cast members for budget reasons. Like Dratch and Horatio and Parnell. And I was still on the show. So when it happened finally to my cartoons, I was like, yeah.
So you feel like you got cut really for budgetary reasons?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the show kind of blew up again right after I left, because that's when Tina Fey played Sarah Palin.
Right.
It was literally the next season. Like I stepped out of the building and fireworks. Because that was really the biggest thing to happen to SNL in 20 years.
Right.
It really was. It was dominating the internet like SNL never had in the time I was there.
And the digital shorts were really...
The digital shorts were
really an online sensation at this point.
Oh yeah, the digital shorts sort of, the most important things that happened to SNL in that decade were Tina herself, and then, you know, the digital shorts, and Downey kind of sort of that debate sketch with Gore and Bush, like sort of making SNL relevant politically again. It was a great, turnaround decade for SNL.
All right, so I want to take a little bit of a left turn, but it's a significant one. I didn't mean literally. I saw you look over there.
I was about to, and then I thought, it's more of a Chevy thing. He'd commit. Chevy would commit.
But talk about Night of Too Many Stars.
Sure. Night of Too Many Stars happened because I have a son with autism, and he was diagnosed in 1999, and we were thrust into a community that we were completely unfamiliar with, of amazing parents, and their activism and dedication was very inspiring. And it got to a point where I was like, well, what am I going to do? What can I do to contribute? Because a lot of them were, you know, very up on the biomedical stuff. And then Michelle and I kind of, my wife, I decided that one thing I have is funny friends. So I'd kind of be a jerk not to do this. So I had the idea to do these specials. And my wife and I decided we wanted to do them for schools and programs and services, because everybody else was focused on biomedical research, which, you know, is all well and good, but a lot has changed in the 15 or 18 years we've been doing this in terms of people's attitude toward autism as a horrendous epidemic. You know, words like that were used, and disease, and we kind of sort of, even back then, wanted to kind of steer the conversation a little toward, like, these people have this condition, and let's help them in this world, you know, as opposed to all the focus being on a cure.
Well, I think you were saying that you really felt that there weren't a lot of resources and good schools and accommodations.
Yes. Well, that's sort of what, yes. We had a lot of trouble getting Daniel into a school that was helpful. He's very severely affected. And we could not get into, there were very few schools, and we couldn't get into any of them. So we were able to fundraise with some other parents who needed a school and start a school. But that was after Night of Too Many Stars. First, we did the first one on NBC, and Jon Stewart was somebody I didn't know very well, but I knew him enough to ask him to do a very funny bit where Adam Sandler was getting roasted. And, you know, Adam and Conan were my, you know, best friends in Carvey, and they were all part of this. And Adam actually went to Jeff Zucker with me to pitch this to NBC. And so anyway, there was a sketch where Adam's getting roasted, and he has no sense of humor about it, and he's just intimidating everybody progressively. It was the funniest sketch of the night, and Jon Stewart was one of them. And that's all he did for the show, was this one little appearance, and I didn't know him that well, but of everybody who participated, Jon Stewart had the most questions. Just really wanted to know, like, so what are you guys dealing with, you know, and how is he doing, and telling him about the school situation. And he was so curious and empathetic and interested in helping any way he could, and said, any fundraiser you ever want me to do, I told him I was trying to start a school. Let me host a fundraiser. So he hosted a fundraiser, and we were able to raise a lot of money. This is Jon Stewart Daily Show, to George Bush era. Right. You couldn't get anyone bigger to host your event in New York City. And we raised enough money to start a school like 6 months later.
After the first one?
Yeah, the first one was its own thing. Then he hosted a fundraiser just for the school.
Oh, okay.
And we raised a ton of money, started the school. The school still exists. It did not, for whatever reason, it was not ideal for my son. It worked, it was successful for kids who were higher functioning. My son continued to have problems, and it wasn't until he was 7 years old that he got into, a school that could really make a difference for him. But aside from that, John then got the Comedy Central people involved, and they sponsored a night at the Beacon, and then that led to doing Night of Too Many Stars on Comedy Central, which we did for, I think we did 6 of them over 12 years. And then John transitioned over to HBO, and now we're doing them there. It's we raised $30 million and tried to make really funny shows where it's always a challenge because people assume that it's a fundraiser, it's going to be dour, and no one's going to be as funny as they really are in real life. But we tried to do crazy kind of live auctions, like Chris Rock will chew out your ex on the phone for you, where we actually had people bid, and Chris called the ex-boyfriend of this woman, and he told me it was the biggest laugh he'd ever gotten on stage in his life, which was pretty amazing for Chris Rock to say that.
And the Paul Rudd thing, I remember.
The Wheel of Rudd.
The Wheel of Rudd.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was one we did where we just called people out of the audience because we had so many live auctions. We wanted to do something for people in the audience who couldn't afford to auction. So we just pulled people out of the crappiest seats at the Beacon and brought them down. And they just would spin a wheel, and whatever the wheel said, Paul Rudd had to do, whether it was like take a slap in the face or Eskimo kiss. And the great one was this one guy who spun and got Baby Bird. And
What's Baby Bird?
Baby Bird was they brought out a roasted chicken, and this guy took a couple of pieces and chewed them in his mouth. And Paul Rudd agreed to accept the food.
The pre-masticated food.
Pre-masticated food, the chicken, and actually accept it and eat it. And literally, he just ran off the stage for a second. It's like, I'm going to throw up. I really thought he was going to throw up, but he didn't. And he's my hero. He's untouchable. He's bulletproof for me. I'll do anything for that guy after that.
Now, the most memorable moment, and I remember from sitting in the seats at the Beacon, was a young woman named Jodi DiPiazza.
Oh, yeah.
And Katy Perry. Do you want to tell about that?
Yeah. It was one of the challenges of doing the show is like you want people to give money, but you also, I didn't want it to be doom and gloom. We want to emphasize what the money does, what it goes to. Wanted to emphasize why it's worth putting all this money into helping these people who some people are like, well, what's all this money going to do? How are they going to contribute to society? And, because that's an argument I hear a lot. Well, if we find a cure and if we do this, then these people can, it's a lot cheaper than blah, blah, blah. They'll contribute to society. And I also wanted to make this case that, they're people. You don't necessarily, some of them can't talk. Some of them seem like they're just in their own world, quote unquote, but they are not without emotion, and they are not like empty vessels. They're really full human beings inside there that are struggling, and they deserve everything. They deserve the best life they can have, just like we care about any other people with a condition like this. You know, that's what's tricky about autism. Like, some people can look at an autistic person and think they're happy, they're fine in their own world, and it's just, and you know, there are high functioning autistic people who make that case, like, I don't want to be changed, and that's fine, you know. But there's a lot of kids who just need help. They need help communicating, you know. Like the iPad has made a huge difference for my son because it's lightweight, and there's a program on it where he can like press a picture and he'll hear the voice saying what the word is, and it helps him learn how to talk and communicate.
Really?
Yeah. It's like a picture to words program, and you know, it used to be on a really bulky machine, and now it's on a very lightweight iPad, and it's changed his life in a lot of ways, more than anything else, because it's helped him to communicate and eliminates a level of frustration that he always had. So, you know, there's all kinds of programs that can, you know, just bring a kid out a little more, or an adult, and connect them to the world and make their life fuller. And why aren't they entitled to that just for existing and just for being, you know, full human beings? And there's this moment so we had a film where Jodi DiPiazza, we show her, you know, her struggle as a little girl, and then how music, she had an affinity for it, and that, you know, with the help of therapists, how that helped bring her out, and she's able to talk, and she's actually a brilliant musician, and she came out and started singing Firework, and there's this amazing moment where she's playing it and singing it, and she seems to have kind of a poker face going, and then the audience applauds, like, you know, as she's doing the first verse. She hits a cool note and the audience applauds, and you see her smile. And to me, that was like, okay, we did it. That just got me, because it was like, that's everything I'm trying to say, you know. They applauded, and it matters to her, you know. She's one of us. And, you know, and then she continued, and then Katy Perry did the duet with her, you know, and that was a whole thing, like, where I didn't really know how to get to Katy Perry. I had seen an interview once where Katy Perry said she admired Sarah Silverman. I knew Sarah Silverman, so I called her and said, do you know Katy Perry? She didn't, but she said she would DM her on Twitter and tell her about this. Because we'd already reached out to Katy Perry, and they said she's not available, you know, kind of a boilerplate answer. But and then I had the girl play Firework. I had Jodi play it at her house, and so Sarah got the tape of Jodi playing Firework to Katy Perry, and Katy Perry agreed to do it. And, you know, it's
one of the most moving things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, me too. It's like, other than my kids and wife, it's like the last thing I want to see before I die, which is in about 5 minutes, because this interview's gone about, 60 years?
All right. Well,
no, we're good. I mean, no, keep going. I'm just making a self-effacing joke for the 3 people left.
Yeah, let's wrap up a few things about Triumph, and we'll talk about craft and summing up, and we'll be done.
Craft. Let's just start with a little, and then I'll get
Let's just sort of bring Triumph up to date, because we sort of left Triumph off just in sort of the Conan era, but you found other applications for Triumph. Well, first of all, because you mentioned the Wiener Circle, that led to a whole other thing, which you and I talked about extensively at one point. Yeah. Do you want to talk about Jack and Triumph?
You know, it didn't. I think it's really funny. It was an attempt at a sitcom with Jack McBrayer and Triumph, and cohabitating as a child star who had grown up and is reunited with the dog who he was on the show with. And the dog is desperate to get back into show business, and the child star is kind of reformed and happy now. And
so with Jack
dynamic.
McBrayer sort of is like Timmy to Triumph's
Lassie,
Lassie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Lassie is a craven asshole. Will do anything to get back in.
It's a solid frame for those two.
Yeah.
And
everybody wanted to buy it, and we chose Adult Swim because Adult Swim made a preemptively significant offer. So instead of going with my friend Kent Alterman at Comedy Central or NBC, who owned the character,
or your friend Dan Pasternak at IFC.
you wanted it? But you had no money.
We offered a pilot.
Yeah, you offered a pilot. No,
yes, we also had no money.
Comedy Central offered 6 episodes, and their budget would not have been the Adult Swim, but it was a preemptive offer. It was just insane.
How many episodes did they give?
20, guaranteed.
I mean, that's remarkable.
Yes. It was really like, how are we not gonna take this? But Adult Swim my one fear was that it's the absolute worst place to do it, because every other place it will be the craziest show on that network, and on Adult Swim it may be misinterpreted as the reverse. Like, is this a parody? What is this? Is there a laugh track? It wasn't. There was a live audience. But it turned out that ended up being the case, where it did okay, but it wasn't catching on big, because there were people, they just were against the aesthetic of a laugh track or even a studio audience. And it wasn't a parody. It was a legitimate, bad 80s sitcom.
Right.
But the whole joke was the characters in that kind of a sitcom.
It was a meta version of a bad 80s sitcom.
Yeah, but it was not a parody of a sitcom.
Right.
And that's why I think that particular audience was not necessarily the best to connect to it. And originally, to be honest, Adult Swim had told us they were going to expand to 10 o'clock. I thought it was going to be on at 10 o'clock, but it was on at 12 or after, 2 Family Guys at midnight or something.
But it also had a really innovative component, which was it was not just straight sitcom.
Right.
You also had, and
We
this
did
was
remotes.
Right, but you wove them into
Yes.
the narrative
Yes.
of the show.
We did, and that was actually my wife Michelle's idea, which when she had that idea, I was like, I want to do this. Because that was the coolest idea in the show, was because before that, I'd seen Bonnie Hunt, who was a great improv actress. She did a show where she played a reporter, so she could do remotes within the show where she could improvise, but they were always presentational. And I had not figured out a way to do remotes. And then Michelle said, just create scenarios that demand you go here or there, and that will be the remote. And I got so excited at that concept. And, I liked the shows we made, but
I did too.
it was not a good fit there, and I actually asked for a buyout after 7 episodes, because I felt like I'm misspending Triumph's capital here. This is not going to last after 20. Mm-hmm. I didn't have faith that it was going to last, so I was like, let's cut and run. And then 2016 was coming up, and I started pitching political specials to different networks and chose Hulu, because they said they would do multiple ones, and had a great time doing those. Did a lot of covered the 2016 campaign, and did kind of crazy stuff and that all came out of Trump, where people started. Lawrence O'Donnell and the Wall Street Journal separately started calling Trump the insult comic. Right. President or a candidate or something, and And I realized that so politics has gotten so low and disgusting that Triumph actually is above it now and can kind of, be appropriate. And so one of the signature kind of ideas was Triumph coaching Mike Huckabee on how to debate Donald Trump.
How did you get Mike Huckabee to do that?
Well, we went to a Mike Huckabee. So we're in South Carolina going to CPAC, I think that's what it's called, the conservative, and getting thrown out very quickly of that thing. But there was like a Mike Huckabee breakfast. He was running for president, and like a pancake breakfast thing. So already Mike Huckabee pancake breakfast is a perfect setup for Triumph. Because you see, he's fat, he's enormous. Anyway, so we go there and they stop us and say, well, you can't shoot here, but you're Robert Smigel, right? This guy named Hogan Gidley, who now works for the Trump administration because Sarah Huckabee got him in.
Right.
Because Hogan was working for Mike Huckabee, and he's just a big comedy fan. And he convinced Mike Huckabee to do a bit with Triumph. I said, what about this? I said, he introduced me to Huckabee after the event and said, are you up for this idea? And Huckabee loved it. And so we do the bit, and Huckabee gets a few huge laughs from jokes that we wrote for him.
Right.
Because Triumph's trying to give him mean jokes to say at the debate, Marco Rubio looks like the kind of guy who, when he was a kid, he pulled his pants all the way down to pee. It's got an enormous laugh. And so Mike Huckabee now thinks that he's a comedian.
And to this day,
yes,
tweets jokes.
Tweets jokes, maybe the worst jokes on Twitter, consistently. And I feel like we created an amiable monster.
You also did a really memorable piece that I think is so illuminating in terms of this moment in which we're living in comedy, which was the trigger warnings with the college students. Do you remember this piece?
Yeah, I remember it. Holy shit, yeah.
Talk about
proud
that.
of it because, one thing I like about doing politics with Triumph, two things, is that, it's an era where punching down is hard to do. So politics is pretty safe that way.
Yeah.
You can really, you're shitting on the establishment and on a system that's completely screwed. I mean, I would love to be covering the impeachment trial. I'd love to be covering all kinds of things right now. But but I also like that Triumph is not afraid to make fun of both sides, and the Triumph goes out and confronts people instead of just talking into a camera, through down an echo chamber, as they say, where you're just talking to people who agree with you. I just find it way more interesting to confront people and see what happens. So in this case, we made fun of the liberal side. This was a school, University of New Hampshire, that had actually come out with a manual of just talking about specific words that you shouldn't say anymore. Apparently, somebody had decided to discontinue it, but it had come out, and it was enough fodder for Triumph to confront some of these kids about. Words like freshman were considered no longer politically appropriate. I don't know why. Maybe because of man, or fresh is somehow evocative of, sexuality, like fresh meat, or I have no idea. And Triumph had, what was the one? Oh, freshman orientation. And Triumph's like, shouldn't it be Asian mentation? It was a lot of fun mockery and some really crude stuff that I probably couldn't even say now.
I remember Triumph being very sexually forward with a young woman.
He said something very inappropriate about licking himself like as soon as this bit is over or something. Like something that like literally a year later I was like, I don't think Triumph could say that now, you know? But at the time, you always follow the instincts of the audience. You know, the audience cues you as to what's appropriate and what's not. And it's always good to, you know, I don't have a problem with adjusting for those kinds of things. I mean, there are things I feel people should not have a problem with, and other things that I consider not politically correct. I consider them progress.
Do you feel like you have different guardrails for Triumph than you would in any other sort of comic exploration?
Probably, again, Triumph can get away with more because he's a cute little dog puppet. But you'd be surprised. There's, you know, ultimately I think you still have to be wary of what you say. It's not like the character's a novelty anymore. So, you know, the longer you're around, the less leeway you have, I think, in that regard. So.
All right, let's head into sort of some questions about sort of your process and sort of summing up. Process. So talk about what it is that still excites you about comedy as a way of expressing ideas.
Getting paid. You see, folks, I'm a parent of 3 children. Okay, so getting paid is one. What excites me? Anything that feels new. There's still new out there. You know, I'm doing a show now. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's the people at a production company showed me this, you know, spitting image thing they were trying to do with human puppets. I wasn't very interested because it's been done and because I'd rather see actors in sketches playing Trump and Putin in general. But it occurred to me that, well, if the puppets were doing sketches with celebrities in the sketches too, and then that might be interesting. Or what if the puppets were actually doing Triumph-like remotes? So that was enough to get me interested in the show that one of the things I'm working on right now. It's a show where there would be, you know, for example, Kanye West puppet goes to a Trump rally, spouts off incredibly crazy shit about black people and slavery, and let's see who agrees and like, you know, just who's going to react how. Or, you know, an Alec Baldwin puppet goes to outside a restaurant and challenges real paparazzi, that kind of stuff. Just felt like an interesting experiment. So that gets me into it.
It seems like the experiments, though, that you are attracted to still have a certain provocative quality to them.
Yeah, but I mean, I got excited writing a movie for Adam a couple of years ago that was unlike anything I'd gotten to do, which was this. I directed a movie called The Week Of that had Adam and Chris Rock in it, and it was so not provocative. So
no, it was really touching.
It was really gentle, and
yeah.
But it was like as much my comedy as any Triumph bit. It was just another side that I never get to do about, you know, awkwardness and just family humor that Adam and I have in common. And
but you also threw a man with no legs into a ball pit.
Yeah, there were a couple of broad moments, but mostly it was.
By the way, I say that was from the perspective of someone who loved and thought it was so sweet and so touching and so lovely.
Yeah. Yes, there is insane physical humor in the show as well. I guess you're right, but that's about as me as any other piece as a Triumph piece. Or even more so.
Yeah.
That's reflective of.
In general,
it's funny to me.
What's your writing process when you're coming up with something new? When you're trying to figure out what's new, what's the process for you?
It's usually accidental. sorry to say. It's like it's rare that I have an idea that really inspires me that I sit down and think of, as opposed to being in mid-conversation with somebody and saying, well, wait a minute. What if these two superheroes, people thought that was just came out of a conversation. Look Well came out of a conversation.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like you stumble on to the thing that gets you excited?
I do stumble on. I stumble on, and then I do it, and then I stumble. And no, it does happen a lot. I think Michael O'Donoghue once said, like, a lot of my best ideas are mistakes, like misunderstandings. Like I heard someone say something, and I interpreted it wrong, and my interpretation was an unintentional comedy sketch. I mean, that hasn't happened to me much, but definitely it's just connections, you know. I'm making a connection through talking to someone or through reading something. It's very rare that I sit down and, you know, just have something come up out of nowhere. And I really don't have a writing regimen that way. I'm not one of these people who's like, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to sit down in front of the computer and no matter what, I'm going to write something. It's just never been that way for me.
That's interesting.
I just have ideas and I chase them and develop them. And a lot of times I'll call on a friend like Feldman or somebody. And if he connects to the idea, then I have somebody to bounce off of. And that's really, you know, the start of it. And then writing up stuff can be absolute torture sometimes, that part of it. It's like the happiest part of the process is having the idea and getting excited and building on it with a friend or something. And
you certainly, is for someone who maybe has a little bit of an arm's length from your process, but has seen you as you've been working on things, you certainly seem, okay, maybe not structured in terms of like having a regimen, but you certainly seem disciplined in that I see you turn things over and look at it from every angle in almost kind of an obsessive fashion.
Yeah. Well, again, my wife thinks I'm on the spectrum, and maybe, who knows, but I do get obsessive about details, always have been. I just think comedy is in the details a lot of times.
I really agree with that.
It's a game of inches, my friend. Although I've been a little more lax about it over the years, where I've been able to be like, okay, it'll work either way kind of thing. But not always, not always. There are times when it's got to be delivered this way. I used to, sometimes when I was doing TV Funhouse cartoons, people would do line readings, and they would, you know, go home, and I would say, great job. And then I would go through the takes, and I would like give me the first 3 words from take 1, and the next 3 from take 3, and bump them up together. And then I've talked to some people like Noah Baumbach, and he said, yeah, I do that.
Okay. Does it make you feel a little bit better?
It did, yeah. It did. Made me feel just like...
less crazy?
Not less crazy, but just like I'm not the only one.
How would you define your style of comedy? I know you've said that you feel like you've got a lot of range, but...
It's really hard, you know. Because, I mean, there's always silliness is a big part of it, but awkwardness has always been kind of a source for me. Some awkward element that, you know, needs to be addressed in some manner, whether it's through incredibly broad strokes or by just replicating awkwardness. I don't know.
At one point you said that you felt like your comedy was, and I don't know if you meant this sort of self-effacingly or pejoratively, but you said that you thought that there was a lot of gimmickry that characterized your comedy, that you said you're a comedy trick shot artist.
Yeah, I said that to you, probably talking about, especially in the 90s. Yeah, I mean, like puppets talking to humans is a new gimmick. It's something I haven't done in a long time. I come up with a gimmick like that, but Yeah, in the 90s, after SNL, the core of some of the bits I came up with were gimmicks, like the clutch cargo thing that I did with Dino on Conan was, a gimmick, and other bits. Once we left SNL, it just became, a situation where I was more in control of everything that I could control what was going to be put out there. And I started coming up with just silly trick shots like, okay, now let's take the voices of real people and make cartoons out of them, or let's have puppets, animal puppets interact with live animals. That was a big one. Just a lot of that happened in the 90s. And yeah, I mean, they're just, you could call them gimmicks or just innovations. I don't know that's a nicer way of putting them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very conceptual. I mean, you're a conceptual artist.
At times, yeah. I mean, that's always what attracted me to comedy, like when I was a teenager, and was the shock of the new, like the Steve Martin stuff, like the modern art comedy that was deconstructing what had preceded it. That's what I liked, stuff that was just tearing down the foundation, and Letterman, and didn't really understand what was special about Jerry Seinfeld till I got older and, just started to appreciate the craft of brilliant observational jokes. Because once you're done with your genius gimmicks, they're funny for a while, and then you remember, okay, now I gotta kind of rely on jokes to keep it funny, like Triumph. Triumph continues to be funny because the jokes are great.
Right. What you created are containers, but they're refillable containers.
Yes. But Triumph's evolved, I can't just, have sex. Well, I can't. But neither can Triumph. Triumph can't, have sex with a live animal for 20 years and have it still be funny. It's just not that. It's not that kind of bit, So really, a lot of his success, his sustained success, has just had to do with going back to the craft of joke writing.
Right.
And
do you think you can teach someone to be funny?
I think you can teach someone who's kind of funny to be funnier. Yeah, definitely. I've seen it.
You have?
Yeah, I've seen it at SNL. I've seen writers come in who weren't that funny at first, didn't seem that funny, and kind of just learned from whomever they admired. They just figured out, okay, well, I see why that's funny, because, it's like they see the formula. I'm not saying that they can turn into Jack Handy or something, but you can figure out, you have to start as funny to some degree, but I feel like I've seen writers come up with smarter premises over the years that they're at Saturday Night Live, figure out how to, not go with their first idea, as Downey would put it.
Right.
And they would sometimes ape, you could boil down a premise that a writer has created for a certain sketch and kind of subliminally absorb what's funny about it, and it's like information that's passed to you, and now you can apply that kind of a premise to a different situation.
No, when you put it that way, it's interesting because you talked about guys like Downey, who had sort of been a mentor to you, but also the inspiration or the permission that you got from some of your contemporaries like Odenkirk or Conan,
right,
that sort of freed you up to
for me
trust
it went,
a certain comic instinct of your own.
For me it went both ways, because I kind of learned how to write an SNL sketch from the older writers there, and I wrote smarter sketches. Like, I think I started out funny, but I think I got smarter and wrote better sketches as I went along. But at the same time, I was suppressing kind of an inner pureness that came out later, especially when I, in my later years at SNL and then at Conan.
How do you feel like television, however you want to define television, because obviously it's not the device as much as it is the delivery system. How do you feel it's changed since you first started?
Television.
Since this is the Television Academy.
Yeah. Well, there's just 1,000 ways to be on television now, as opposed to 6. There were 3 networks and a couple of local stations and public TV. And television used to be, if you wanted to be on television, you had to appeal to, quote unquote, the masses. Mm-hmm. Will it play in Peoria was the cliche, caveat of that era for years. And that's kind of irrelevant now for 2 reasons. One is that there's so many more outlets that exist that it's almost like you have to do niche. You have to have a niche show to kind of get on certain networks that want to brand themselves a certain way. If it appeals to too many people, they're not going to want it. It's gotten to that point. Secondly, Peoria is a lot cooler than it was in the 70s because of the internet and because of technology and because we really don't need to leave our houses to be hip anymore. Everything is right there in our laptops or iPhones.
What's so interesting is so much of your best known work has sort of relied on exploiting and reinterpreting a lot of the tropes of old television. You know what I mean?
God,
I mean,
yes.
Look Well and all the cartoons. Have you been inspired in any way to sort of look at a whole new kind of language that has been conceived and is being spoken in this new era as inspiration for stuff that you want to do?
It's a good question. I mean, most of my ideas now are not like, I've kind of exhausted the referential category.
Really?
I feel like I have. I feel like, I've pretty much exhausted my childhood and all the shows and types of shows that amused me for taking themselves seriously in one way or the other. And now, most of the ideas I'm excited about are not as referential toward any kind of corny format or anything.
Okay.
Also because it's been years since TV was like that. It's really interesting. TV is like ironic. I mean, there's very little on TV that takes itself seriously compared to when we were kids. And it got to the point where SNL seemingly had nothing to parody. And this group in the 2000s, which is my favorite cast ever, possibly, between Forte and Armisen and Kristen and Bill Hader and Sudeikis and Maya Rudolph, and they're just...
It's an unbelievable group of people.
Yeah, and time has proven that, I don't think there's ever been a collection of geniuses like that, all like-minded, which destroyed another myth about SNL that, oh no, it's got to have... If you don't hate a couple of sketches, then we're not doing our job, because that's what you would hear, like that it's got to appeal to all these different sensibilities. But that group were very locked in everybody liked everybody's stuff.
And everybody worked really well together.
Yeah, it's really probably...
I mean, Fred was as brilliant with Kristen as he was with Maya.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah, or Forte,
Right.
who was brilliant with Sudeikis. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've never seen a group that cohesive and like-minded, the writers and the performers. And to me, it was an amazing era. But one thing that was interesting about it was they seemed to run out of TV parodies because TV had gotten so hip. So they started to do all these nostalgia channels, like you're watching the Hallmark Channel, remember? And they seemed to they were like doing Vincent Price variety shows and like 60s game show parodies with like Kristen Wiig's characters. Right. They had so many shows like that in that era that were, it was as if they
had to reframe.
There's nothing funny about new television, so let's just, thankfully there's like the Hallmark Channel and we can, or the Game Show Network, and and then we can show something from the 60s that takes itself seriously. It was really interesting that it had folded back on itself that way. But anyway, that's a dilemma that, TV is harder to parody. Like you don't really see, when I was at SNL, there were parodies of shows all the time. Mm-hmm. And you don't really see as much of that anymore. You know,
that's interesting.
Occasionally, but not to the same degree.
So, since this is for the Television Academy, the people who bring you the Emmy Awards, you've received numerous Emmy nominations through the years. I think you were nominated for one of the Triumph Hulu specials.
Yes, I brought Triumph to the Emmys, and I was going to accept this Triumph. Charo was my date, and Mr. Belding was with me too, and I was going to make them go up on stage. It would have been glorious.
Would have been amazing.
And I would have said, I'm here to right some wrongs because, you know, it's a disgrace that these two people have never won Emmy Awards for all the good. I don't remember what the hell I was going to say, but I had a whole thing prepared for, like, you know, why these people deserved, you know, to be not to be overlooked. And
but you did receive at least 2 Emmys that I'm aware of when you were with SNL, right?
Yes, and one for Night of Too Many Stars later on.
So what did those awards mean to you?
Very little.
Really?
Yeah. The first one, I mean, it's fun what it meant to me was, oh, I get to give this to my parents. Like literally, I was so happy for my parents. No, I was happy. I think awards are idiotic. They're basically designed as, I mean, I know it's the TV Academy, but I mean...
You did the cartoon for the 25th anniversary of SNL. You've bitten that hand.
Yeah.
Say what you got to say.
I just think that these things are, I understand why they exist, because it's great promotion for the industry and all the shows. And I understand even why, if you were nominated and your show is like on the bubble or needs attention, then yes, it's very important to get an Emmy nomination. I'm that way with Night of Too Many Stars. I take that very seriously, trying to get an Emmy nomination. I like ask friends sometimes, can you throw in a vote for us?
Because you want to keep that going.
I want to keep that going, and I think, you know, networks like nominations nowadays more than ratings, because everything is so dissipated ratings-wise that these things matter more now than they did back then when everything was about ratings. But yeah, when I won SNL, I saw a photo of it recently, and I'm like deadpan, like just trying to be too cool for the room, standing behind Al Franken, because I didn't want to act like, yee. I just thought it was lame, and I couldn't wait to get home. I got off the plane, took a cab to my parents' house, and gave it to them. And
were they happy to get it?
Oh my God, they're unbelievably happy to get it.
So then
And they took a picture of me in a bad sweater from the 80s that they still have. It's like the most embarrassing sweater, me holding this Emmy for them.
I want that picture.
And then, oh no, you don't.
Yes, I do.
All right. And then in 2002, when I won my second Emmy, I brought my parents. which was great, except I was nominated against myself. Remember I said that the Conan show was nominated for the Triumph bit, the Star Wars bit, which I was so flattered because they have an amazing writing staff and it's the best written late night show, at least in that era, I think it was. And they had chosen the Star Wars bit. So I got to be nominated. But I was nominated also for Saturday Night Live, and which I had done a cartoon for that episode, and I love the people at Saturday Night Live. But this thing, the Conan show had never won an Emmy, so I was really rooting for them, and I was sitting with them, with my parents, and I'm probably the only person who's won an Emmy who's like, and the winner is Saturday Night Live, and I was like,
Because you wanted to win for the Conan.
I wanted the Conan people to win, and I was sitting with them.
Right.
But my parents were sitting right next to the other Conan writers. They're here with me, and they're like, yeah! Just ringing in their ears. My parents celebrating. So...
Hard to be angry at that.
No. I was super happy in the end that my parents got to be there for me winning an Emmy. It was fantastic. In retrospect, because that's all it's about.
Right.
Jason Alexander never won an Emmy.
Is that true?
Yeah. He's the greatest sitcom character ever, probably. And certainly, yeah. Emmy worthy. I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever been better on a sitcom than Jason Alexander. And he never won. So how seriously can you take winning or losing? You just have to be happy you have a job.
All right, I'll redirect because maybe this will give you an opportunity to say something, that might not be tinged with as much So we at the Television Academy Foundation have been conducting these oral history interviews for over 20 years. I personally have been doing these for 23, almost 24 years.
Yeah, my condolences.
Thank you. So what do you think the value is of preserving these personal behind-the-scenes stories from within the industry?
Oh, they're great. Absolutely. It's like Showa.
Which was the inspiration for this whole construct.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
It absolutely was.
That's so funny.
Because I think the idea was we have to get these stories for this young medium while the people who were still there at the beginning are still around to tell them.
Yeah. And you know what? It's, show is good, but this is, it's a little more variation.
Well, this is really important.
Snip, snip, snip.
So what's the best piece of advice anyone ever gave you about working in this business?
Like, I got to be honest, I've seen more Academy clips than Showa clips. Like, I watched The Writer from Mr. Ed. I was really into that guy.
Well, these are probably funnier.
Him. Yeah. I hope they're funnier. Yeah.
So what's the best piece of advice you feel you were ever given that you'd want to pass along?
Oh, my God. It's all little things from different people over the years, you know. I don't know if there's a single piece of advice that anyone, and I don't have a joke answer either. Okay, just roll the clock.
Okay,
keep going. No, we'll figure it out.
We can circle back if you.
I don't know. I mean, when the best advice Lauren ever gave me was, like I said in my second week there, he said, "Make the cast look good, and you'll look good." Like, I understand. It was just a very concise, eloquent expression of, if you're writing for a performance medium, just write for the performer. Don't, make sure you. Anyway.
What do you think is your proudest career achievement?
Oh, proudest career achievement. After this, longest interview never to be watched.
I personally will watch this several times.
Highest ratio of minutes to viewers in the history of interviews.
We're not going to get a straight answer from you on this.
I forgot the question. What's my proudest achievement?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I have to say
Professionally.
professionally. So does that mean Night of Too Many Stars doesn't count?
No, it absolutely
I
can.
mean, by far, it's just like we raised $30 million for things that are way more important than, animals having sex with puppets, which is my second proudest achievement. And it's very close. Watch your back, Night of Too Many Stars, because animals fucking puppets is on your tail.
So, flip side.
I mean, honestly, that shot of the dog humping Triumph at Westminster is, it's pretty good.
It's really good.
Yeah. It's the end of the 2000 Westminster show. Look it up. It's
TV Academy when you prepare the Robert Smigel in memoriam.
Oh yeah. If I make the Emmys in memoriam, which probably won't, but if I do, I'll put it on record now. Don't show me, just show Triumph being butt fucked by a live animal. Please, I beg you.
See, if there's nothing else of value we've accomplished here, you have been able to tell the Academy what to show upon your demise.
If someone told me that was going to happen before I died, I would die a happy man.
I think we can get you some reasonable assurances on that. All right. We'll
Wouldn't
follow
it be
up.
great if something in the in memoriam got a huge laugh? Wouldn't that be great for once?
It would be.
All
right. So, career regrets. Anything?
Yeah. Dana Carvey, not watching Tim Allen's show earlier. That's a big one. Because, it's Dana Carvey. He's like one of my best friends. He didn't deserve... He could have had a hit sketch show, And he doesn't act like he regrets it at all. He says, I'm happy. I love the show the way it was. Everything worked out for the best. I don't know about that one, but it worked out well for Carell and Colbert. And for me, actually, I got to do cartoons on SNL. I had a great job for years. So a lot of good came out of that show, but I still feel like the whole point of the show was to make a show for Dana Carvey to shine in, and we screwed up. So that's my biggest, that's the biggest screw up.
How would you like to be remembered?
Oh my God, you really want me to answer that seriously?
It's a stock standard question for these things.
Like I said, if they...
You know what? I'll tell you
The in memoriam of the dog humping Triumph would sum it up.
We can ask these summary
hated
questions.
To take himself seriously.
Of Triumph, if you want to close with that.
Oh, Jesus.
Do you want to do that?
I will Triumph... Okay, well...